Australia's story begins long before the arrival of Europeans, stretching back to a time when the land was solely inhabited by its original custodians. For over 65,000 years, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples have thrived on this continent, developing rich and diverse cultures. They are the oldest living cultures on Earth, with a deep spiritual connection to their land, which they see as a living entity. Their history, laws, and knowledge are woven into the very fabric of the country, passed down through countless generations. At the heart of Indigenous culture lies the Dreamtime, a complex and profound belief system. This is the foundation of their beliefs, encompassing creation stories, spirituality, and law, guiding their way of life. The Dreamtime explains the origins of the land and its people, offering a timeless narrative that connects past, present, and future. It is a living concept, passed down through generations through song, dance, and storytelling, ensuring the continuity of their cultural heritage. This profound connection to country continues to shape Indigenous identity and worldview, influencing their daily lives and practices. The arrival of Europeans marked a turning point in this ancient history, bringing profound changes and challenges. It brought with it devastating consequences that continue to reverberate today, affecting Indigenous communities in numerous ways. Understanding this complex past is essential for comprehending modern Australia and its journey towards reconciliation, fostering a future built on mutual respect and understanding. In 1770, Lieutenant James Cook charted the east coast of Australia, claiming it for the British Crown. This marked the beginning of a new era for the continent, one that would be defined by exploration, colonization, and profound change. This event, seemingly insignificant at the time, would have far-reaching implications, altering the course of history for both the British and the Indigenous Australians. It paved the way for the arrival of the First Fleet in 1788 and the establishment of a British penal colony at Sydney Cove. This marked the beginning of permanent European settlement in Australia. The British arrived in a land they considered terra nullius, meaning empty land, despite the rich and complex societies that already existed there. This legal fiction ignored the presence of Indigenous Australians and their deep connection to the land, a connection that had been nurtured over tens of thousands of years. It provided a convenient justification for the dispossession and oppression that followed, as the British sought to impose their own systems and structures. The arrival of the Europeans marked the beginning of a long and painful chapter in Australian history, one characterised by conflict, resistance, and survival. Indigenous Australians, who had lived in harmony with the land for millennia, were suddenly confronted with an alien force that sought to reshape their world. Their way of life, their culture, and their very existence were under threat as the newcomers brought with them new diseases, technologies, and ways of living. The clash of these two worlds would have devastating consequences, leading to a legacy of trauma and resilience that continues to this day. The arrival of Europeans triggered a wave of violence, disease, and displacement that decimated Indigenous populations. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples were driven from their traditional lands, their sacred sites desecrated, and their way of life disrupted. Despite the horrors inflicted upon them, Indigenous Australians resisted colonisation with remarkable courage and resilience. From the outset, they fought back against the invaders, defending their land and their way of life. These acts of resistance took many forms, from armed conflict to passive resistance and legal challenges. The frontier wars, as they became known, raged for decades. They were brutal and bloody, leaving an indelible scar on the Australian psyche. The stories of these frontier conflicts, often silenced or ignored, are essential to understanding the true cost of colonisation. The 19th century witnessed significant change and growth in Australia. The discovery of gold in the 1850s triggered a massive influx of immigrants, transforming the social and economic landscape of the country. Cities boomed and new industries emerged. The push for federation gained momentum towards the end of the century. Australians from different colonies began to see themselves as one people, united by a shared destiny. In 1901, the 6 British colonies united to form the Commonwealth of Australia. This newfound unity, however, came at a cost. The rights of Indigenous Australians were largely ignored in the Constitution. They were denied citizenship and excluded from the political process. The legacy of this exclusion continues to cast a long shadow over Australian society. Section 5. A White Australia. In the wake of Federation, Australia sought to define its national identity. One of the most shameful chapters in this period was the implementation of the White Australia policy. This policy, driven by racist ideology, aimed to restrict immigration from non-European countries. The White Australia policy had a profound impact on the nation's demographics and social fabric. It reinforced a culture of racial exclusivity and discrimination. It denied opportunities to generations of potential immigrants and cast a dark shadow over Australia's international reputation. The policy was gradually dismantled in the decades following World War II. This marked a turning point in Australian history, paving the way for a more multicultural and inclusive society. Section 6. Opening the doors. The post-war era saw a dramatic shift in Australia's immigration policy. The doors were thrown open to immigrants from all corners of the globe, transforming the nation's social and cultural landscape. This wave of migration brought with it new skills, new perspectives, and new challenges. It forced Australians to confront their own prejudices and to embrace the richness of diversity. This period of rapid social change laid the groundwork for the multicultural Australia we know today. The dismantling of the White Australia policy was a long and arduous process. It was driven by a growing awareness of the injustices of racial discrimination and a desire to create a fairer and more equitable society. Section 7. Steps towards recognition. The 1960s and 1970s witnessed a growing movement for Indigenous rights in Australia. During this period, the voices of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples grew louder and more insistent. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples began to assert their voices, demanding recognition of their unique place in Australian society. They organised, protested, and held meetings to discuss their rights and the future of their communities. The 1967 referendum was a pivotal moment in this struggle. It marked a significant turning point in the history of Indigenous rights in Australia. Australians voted overwhelmingly to amend the Constitution to allow the Commonwealth to make laws for Aboriginal people and to include them in the census. This was a monumental step forward in the fight for equality and recognition. This was a significant victory, but the fight for equality was far from over. The momentum continued into the 70s with ongoing protests and advocacy for further rights and recognition. The Mabo case, decided by the High Court in 1992, was another landmark victory. This case was a testament to the resilience and determination of Indigenous Australians. This historic decision overturned the legal fiction of terra nullius, recognizing native title for the first time. It acknowledged the traditional rights of Indigenous Australians to their land. It was a momentous step towards acknowledging the injustices of the past and reconciling with Indigenous Australians. The journey towards recognition and equality continues, with each victory building on the last. Section 8. A shared future. The journey towards reconciliation is ongoing. It requires a commitment to truth-telling, to acknowledging the painful legacy of the past, and to working towards a more just and equitable future. Reconciliation is not about erasing the past, but about learning from it. It's about understanding the impact of colonization on Indigenous peoples and working together to create a better future for all Australians. The journey towards reconciliation is not always easy. It requires open hearts, open minds, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. But it is a journey that Australia must undertake if it is to truly heal the wounds of the past and move forward as a united nation. Section 9. The enduring legacy. The legacy of Indigenous Australia is all around us. It is in the land itself, in the stories that have been passed down through generations, and in the vibrant cultures that continue to thrive today. Indigenous Australians have made and continue to make a profound contribution to Australian society. Their art, music, dance and storytelling enrich our lives in countless ways. It is essential that we, as Australians, embrace and celebrate this rich cultural heritage. By learning about Indigenous history, culture and perspectives, we gain a deeper understanding of our nation and ourselves. Section 10. Reconciliation and beyond. Australia stands at a crossroads. The past casts a long shadow, but there is also hope for a brighter future. Reconciliation is within reach, but it requires a continued commitment to justice, equality, and understanding. The Uluru Statement from the Heart, issued in 2017, offers a roadmap for reconciliation. It calls for a constitutionally enshrined voice to Parliament, giving Indigenous Australians a say in the decisions that affect their lives. By embracing the principles of the Uluru Statement, Australia can move forward together as one. It is time for all Australians to walk together on this journey of